Right now, we're in the early stages of game journalism hyping up Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty. That's right, the long awaited DLC expansion for Cyberpunk 2077 is here, and it is going to save the game, so says the narrative. And this has been a pervasive thing that's been circulating for the longest time. Like, game journalists assured us that, like, the patch was coming, the game would be playable, the DLC would, like, fix all of the problems, it would fix the base game, it would do this and do that, it would completely change the original ending, it would be, like, all a completely new experience, right? This would save Cyberpunk 2077. In fact, Cyberpunk 2077 was already saved when the Netflix cartoon Cyberpunk Edge Runners came out, right? When that came out, and like, oh, that turned things around for CD Projekt Red. It saved the game, and it was such a weird, pervasive narrative, right? And now Phantom Liberty is here. It's out now, and it feels as if these guys are going to try and pull like a No Man's Sky situation, in which they pretend that the game is somehow good now after a handful of updates that don't really do anything to fix the core problems with the game. You know, the glitches, the pacing, the general structure, the general gameplay. Like, even if Cyberpunk 2077 was like perfectly playable, it still wouldn't be a good game. And that's always been like my issue with a lot of like modern AAA releases. Like, as long as the game is not completely broken, you're gonna see people like come out and say it's the best game ever, right? You're seeing people say that with Starfield right now, right? You're seeing people say that with like Baldur's Gate 3, right? There are better alternatives to those games, right? They're not particularly special, innovative, or fun, but because they're the hot flavor of the month, like new release, people are talking about them as if they're like the bee's knees, right? They are the biggest games in the world right now because they just came out. And they're not going to be brand new forever. In fact, they're already quite old and tired and forgotten. And Cyberpunk 2077, it's interesting because it's been so long since the original release. Like, when did it come out? 2020? It's been so long that I honestly don't even remember what this game was like when it first came out. I don't remember like the hype cycle and like the decline and the irrelevancy. There was so much controversy, so much like ridiculous behavior from the devs and people making excuses for it. Like, I remember people like coming out and saying that like, oh, the game works fine on my high-end PC, doing typical steampunk like nonsense, right? Pretending as if it was like a console problem and not a problem with like the game as a whole, not a problem with CD Projekt Red. Over promising and under delivering. There were all these like major red flags going into release that the game would be underwhelming, and not a single person listened to me. Like, I remember like predicting this game would bomb like in 2015, right? Like, I remember people like talking about how they were upgrading their PCs in preparation for this game, right? Like, that it was going to be the biggest thing ever, and it was just so laughable and so ridiculous. And seeing the game be a failure now, single-handedly driving CD Projekt Red, which last decade was like the golden child of the industry, the poster child for Western game development, like, single-handedly creating this completely false stereotype that like Slavs are like great game developers for putting out a single game. What happens? Within 5 years, it all collapses. It's all gone, right? We're never going to get another Witcher. We're never going to get another new IP from them. Like, they're just going to milk the same tired IPs into the ground, right? They're just going to do the same thing over and over and over again. And people won't even admit there was a problem, right? Like, it's so weird looking back at like things like the Netflix show, right? For The Witcher, where people pretended as if like Henry Cavill was some great like Geralt of Rivia, and like it was this completely faithful adaptation of the books, which they did not read. That was like true to the source material. It was so good until they had to recast Cavill because of those darn feminists ruining everything. Like, it was completely ridiculous, right? The show was never good, right? The games were never good. The original books weren't very good, right? Like, this like worship of CD Projekt Red, like right from the get-go, was ridiculous, right? Like 10 years ago, they were where Larian is now, right? Where people desperate to like avoid Nintendo consoles and avoid like admitting that Japanese gaming is superior have to like just keep jumping from developer to developer, like from IP to IP, trying to find something to talk about, trying to find something to play, something to hype up, something to pretend is top tier. Right, something to pretend like that this game is legendary, right? Legendary status, something worth talking about and something worth appreciating and loving and just like showing those darn Nintendo fans what for, right? Like that's what this is all about, right? It's crazy to think about how the same people who like accuse Tears of the Kingdom of being a DLC and a rehash of Breath of the Wild are like pretending to be excited for Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, the expansion. It's ridiculous. It's too early to say it like this early on, like whether the DLC will be a success. I would say no, because I feel as if the if people don't like a game, like they're not going to buy the DLC for it. Like we're seeing less and less support for DLC as this stuff becomes more and more commonplace. So much so, like I remember that like when Mortal Kombat 11 first came out, people were talking about not buying the DLC for it because they just weren't getting a lot of mileage out of it. Like, and I have to wonder if that's kind of that mindset's kind of carrying over to other games as well. Like, just give me the base game, give me the core content, and I won't bother with like the DLC add-on content. And considering how bad Cyberpunk 2077 turned out being, like, we may see a situation in which the vast majority of players, people who bought and played the game at release, will not be interested in an expansion because it's been too long. They would rather just play a new game like Tears of the Kingdom than like mess around with this stuff, right? There are just so many better options than a DLC expansion to a subpar product. Right? It's kind of the Baldur's Gate 3 thing all over again. Like, why would I care about Phantom Liberty when I could do something else, right? When I could play any other open world game, when I can do anything else with my time and money, right? Like why exactly would I even bother? And this is after the biggest shill campaign we've ever seen, right? With edge runners and like the media blitz like last year trying to convince us that like the game was perfectly playable, like trying desperately to build up to this release of Phantom Liberty this year, like trying to salvage this game, trying to get some semblance of an audience yet back, and it just doesn't feel as if it's going to work. It does feel like this is, much like Mortal Kombat 1, a complete minor release that is just kind of a blip on the radar when it comes to far superior games that are just going to stop this thing in relevancy and sales. Like, I really don't think it's I really don't see it like being all that relevant or talked about at all. Like the simple fact of the matter is that like CD Projekt Red is done, right? They are never going to put out another relevant game, and Cyberpunk 2077 should be the last time that we ever hear of them.